Disclosure miracles are unfolding all around us. Since October 11th, 2017, when Lue Elizondo first came onto the scene, many seeds have been planted. Thanks to the great hardships and efforts of people like Jim Lukatsky, Chris Mellon, Ryan Graves, David Fravor, David Grush, Karl Nell, Leslie Kean, and countless others who have joined the resistance. These seeds are now sprouting in spectacular fashion. Things will only get more interesting from here as we enter a new world. It is our destiny. Indeed, there are many disclosure miracles slated to happen within months, both known and unknown. Just today, on July 13th, the UAP Disclosure Act version 2.0 has been officially filed by Senator Mike Rounds and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for possible inclusion in the National Defense Authorization Act for 2025. This is huge news, and we're not going to gloss over it. We're going to swan dive off a cliff into the deep, wide ocean of the UAP Disclosure Act 2.0. Let's go, baby. On July 14th, Liberation Times published an article titled, U.S. Senators Push Again for Groundbreaking Law to Unveil Non-Human Intelligence. I will take the liberty to recite an excerpt, and I quote, "If the act is passed, the President would appoint 9 impartial citizens with Senate consent to a newly established UAP Records Review Board. This board would oversee the collection, review, and public disclosure of UAP records and has the authority to examine materials, solicit testimonies, and gather additional witnesses and whistleblowers. The establishment of the review board would prevent government agencies and individuals accused of involvement with illegal UAP programs from investigating and exonerating themselves. This board would eliminate their direct influence over the government's current UAP office, the All-Domain Resolution Office ARROW, a practice multiple sources have reported to Liberation Times. The President would also make final decisions regarding the disclosure or postponement of records related to UAP, provide written justifications for any postponements, and ensure the periodic review and declassification of postponed records. The reintroduction of the Act, intended to be included within the NDAA for fiscal year 2025, could be considered a major rebuke to the ARROW, which concluded in February this year that it had found no empirical evidence for claims that the U.S. government and private companies have been reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology, end quote. Liberation Times understands that whistleblowers with first-hand knowledge of concealed retrieval and reverse engineering programs involving advanced non-human intelligence have chosen to engage with Senators Rounds and Schumer, as well as President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, rather than approach the ARROW. It is further understood that Sullivan was consulted for both last year's and this year's version of the UAPDA, UAP Disclosure Act. Although ultimately last year, Liberation Times sources say that Sullivan failed to provide White House backing when the UAPDA faced opposition from the House of Representatives. It is understood by Liberation Times that figures close to President Biden and his Republican opponent, former President Trump, were involved with the drafting and resurrection of the latest UAPDA. End quote. And that's the excerpt from Liberation Times. Let's continue with the video. Twitter user UAP News asked a really necessary question in all this. Is anyone in the mainstream media going to ask at Senator Schumer and at Senator Rounds why they have reintroduced the UAP Disclosure Act for a second year in a row? Non-human intelligence mentioned over 20 times yet again. And of course, he's referring to the number of times non-human intelligence is referred to in the proposed legislation. It's really stunning how little attention this extraordinary legislation has received. From what I gather, the 2.0 version has all the juicy stuff the initial 1.0 legislation had the first time around. Sadly, it ultimately got gutted, but Congress is not relenting. Let's hope the 2.0 version gets passed intact. It needs to. The time is now. I want the new world. Here, analyst Lester Nair chimes in on the reintroduction of the UAP Disclosure Act. Senate is giving Arrow the middle finger again. Now, let's move on to former Colonel Karl Nell, who I assess may be a first-hand witness of the cover-up of non-human technology and perhaps even bodies. In other words, he may have seen these phenomena with his own eyes at a storage location, and that potentiality wouldn't surprise me at all, or at least not too much. There are a variety of reasons I assess this to be the case, but let's start with something Leslie Kean said in late July of 2023 while being interviewed by journalist Elizabeth Vargas. Leslie Kean was, of course, one of the journalists to break the story about David Grush back in June of 2023. Here's the clip I'm referencing.
David Grush said in his testimony that he talked to 40 people over 4 years, all of whom had information on a secret military program that has non-human craft and remains. Is it surprising to you that none of those 40 people has spoken out?
It is surprising. It actually isn't, Elizabeth. I mean, some of them have. One of them actually was in our article in the debrief. A former Army colonel named Karl Nell. I think maybe some of them have spoken out a little bit, and we just don't maybe put it all together. But
Leslie Kean revealed in that clip that former Colonel Karl Nell was one of the 40 witnesses whom David Grush interviewed in his 4-year investigation. And regarding Karl Nell's level of confidence that the U.S. government is covering up non-human intelligence, you need to look no further than an event he did for Salt Eye Connections New York on May 22nd, 2024.
And so, Karl, here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Karl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
In February of 2024, Karl Nell really put into perspective how absolutely huge the Schumer rounds legislation is. This was, of course, before it got gutted, and obviously before it has been reintroduced.
But first, what is the Schumer Amendment? Well, 10 years ago, probably the Schumer Amendment would have been viewed as UAP UFO disclosure. And the amendment seeks to very clearly clarify what the scope is of their problem set and what they're trying to do about it.
We often lose sight of how far we've come in the disclosure process on account of not having reached the promised land. Everything from now until we reach the promised land is the process. And it's an extraordinarily historical process indeed. Hundreds of years into the future, I believe they will be talking about many of these news stories taking place prior to getting UFO confirmation, which I think is inevitable. I like referring to UFO confirmation as the promised land. For one, I think it's funny. For two, some people proclaim I'm in a cult or part of a religion. So I suppose I should attempt to give them what they expect. Give them what they want. Later in the February 2024 event, Karl Nell went into depth on the Schumer rounds legislation. He emphasized how the review board outlined in this legislation is very different from the independent board found in the JFK Assassination Records Act of 1992, Let's dive right into it.
So the central tenet of the Schumer Amendment is to create this UAP Record Review Board. And so this is very much analogous to what was done in the JFK Assassination Records Act of 1992, where an independent board was set up to review those records. But this legislation differs from that in several significant ways. Number one, obviously the problems are different, right? So in that case, it was more of a retrospective and historical understanding, and there's a finite set of records. Our problem here, it's an ongoing problem. Records are continuing to be generated into the future, and there's this obvious technological surprise concern. There's an immediacy to this. So this records review board that's created is to consist of 9 folks, and we'll get into the composition of that. But that board's going to have certain authorities to review what these offices submit. So the going-in position is, if it's a UAP record, it's got to get disclosed. If the office doesn't want it disclosed, they got to make a case, and why they don't want it disclosed, that case comes to the board, and the board adjudicates that and recommends to the president. The oversight for this board is held in the Senate Homeland Security and Government Accountability Committee, and in the House Oversight Committee, Committee on Oversight and Government Affairs. Let's see, what else? Okay, so the other part of this is, unlike JFK, there's the issue of materials. And so there's a couple other terms of art in here, TUO and NHI. People are somewhat familiar with those, perhaps. Non-human intelligence, so biological evidence of non-human intelligence, that's been talked about in open hearings, and technology of unknown origin. So the Schumer Amendment directs the federal government to exercise eminent domain over those, and then this board is to adjudicate whether the stuff actually is TUO and NHI and whether it should be postponed or disclosed. And we'll get into some of the ramifications of that in a minute. So how's this board going to do this? They're going to develop a plan. And this is a big difference from the JFK legislation. So this plan for all records that they deem need to be postponed for whatever reason has got to indicate a benchmark-driven process with specified occurrences and timeframes for downgrading, review, and declassification for everything that's postponed. And then this plan supersedes all previous declassification guidance that may have been applicable to this material. That's extremely important. That's different than the JFK. The JFK was basically like, should we postpone or not? Okay, and then it gets kicked down the road if they say postpone. Schumer basically says, if you're postponing, you got to tell me exactly what you got to do to release it in a benchmark-driven plan. And then this plan basically becomes the declassification guidance going forward. Now, the point is that the president ultimately has the sole and non-delegable authority. So Congress can't impinge upon, presidential executive authority. So the president makes the ultimate decision based on these recommendations, but once the recommendation's made, they're either immediately disclosed or it's postponed, as we said, or put into, and the decision's put into the Federal Register within 14 days. So the president has to provide a reason to the board on what his decision is, both classified and unclassified. The unclassified reason gets published publicly within 14 days. The other point here is that all the records are to be disclosed within 25 years of the date of creation, unless the president deems otherwise. And Congress has appropriated or authorized the appropriation of $20 million to do this.
By now, you should have a much deeper and clearer understanding of the breadth of the Schumer-Rounds UAP Disclosure Act that has been reintroduced with the intention to get it accepted into the fiscal year 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. Now, there are a few things that former Colonel Karl Nell said that I want to cover quickly. He said, if you're postponing, you got to tell me exactly what you got to do to release it in a benchmark-driven plan. He also said, in reference to the JFK assassination records of 1992, should we postpone or not? Okay, and then it gets kicked down the road if we say postpone, which he underscored is different from the Schumer Rounds Disclosure Act of UAP Disclosure Act that they can't just postpone the release. If they postpone it, it's much more complicated and more difficult to do. They would have to explain exactly what you got to do to release it to eventually get it released. And then Colonel Karl Nell also stated, all records have to be disclosed within 25 years of creation, all records, everything, which is quite remarkable, unless the president deems otherwise. Now, I have been asked on multiple occasions on Twitter, how could anything falsify my belief that within UFO history, some UFOs represent non-human intelligence? And I have made it crystal clear, and it's worth reiterating, that if the Schumer-Rounds legislation gets passed, and we're trying again, which is extremely meticulous and strategic, and is very unlike something that Chris Mellon has said before, that what the investigation that AARO did, the All-Domain Resolution Office, or All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is akin to the Reagan administration investigating the Iran-Contra scandal. Because AARO is basically the DOD. And so they're not going to tell on themselves. It's just basic human psychology. The agencies that Sean Kirkpatrick and others go to get information, they're just going to say, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. I don't think they want to indict themselves, frankly. But the Schumer-Rounds legislation is completely different, highly meticulous, highly strategic. So if we were to get the Schumer-Rounds legislation passed and nothing came out of it, further solidifying the idea of the skeptics, well, that'd be as close as a falsification as we would get in my psychology. Even if I were to still have some emphasizing some suspicion that there might be something to this, all the wind would be taken out of the sails of my argument, and I would have no choice but to acknowledge that my argument's weight has diminished significantly. And I would go even further and say the skeptics have a much better case than they ever did, and they have a better case than I have. So there you go for either falsification or close to falsification. And so, in all reality, frankly, the skeptics, the debunkers, and the cynics should want this legislation passed as much as the believers. Because let me tell you something as if I'm a freaking prophet. Things are coming down the pipe. Whistleblowers are a-coming. Documentaries are a-coming. New hearings are a-coming. And these developments are going to fan the flame of conspiracy theory thinking. Maybe because there is a conspiracy and the U.S. government has covered it up. Maybe because there's a mind virus in the Pentagon and a culture of belief and nonsense. But either way, it's a-coming. And so the Schumer-Rounds legislation would go a long way to take all the wind out of the sails and change the landscape of how the media has been covering UFOs. The scientific community would get less interested, and the media, the mainstream media, would start looking at this topic through a much less serious lens. If something like the Schumer-Rounds legislation got passed and it was established that there's truly nothing to see here. So it does appear that we are going to get more hearings this year. And I anticipate they will be on the level of last year's hearing that took place on July 26 with David Grush, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor. And that's not going to be trivial at all, and it's only going to build upon what we've already accomplished. On June 18th of 2024, Jeremy Corbell goes into the situation that we're in, because the Schumer Rounds amendment did not get passed last year and is being reintroduced, it's like we're starting to go down a more treacherous path where people are becoming less patient with the lies and the obfuscation. And Jeremy and his partner in crime, George Knapp, have been in contact with high-level witnesses. Let's play that clip.
However, this idea that people are coming forward or want to come forward, I can one more time attest to the fact just really recently, we were told about a whole group of whistleblowers who want to speak with us, who are working together to get information out because it was like the easy way didn't work. So now we got to go the hard way. So you and I are currently investigating it. These are not known people. These are not people that spoke with anybody else. These are people that are coming, be like, here's what we know. And then we have to assess it. So it's going to take a little time, but there are people on the inside with first direct hand knowledge that are, or they claim they have that, but coming through good pedigree of individuals connected to us. So I put a little bit of weight on that, when we get tips like this. But yeah, I do believe that it will take some time and we'll be working with government, but also individuals just coming forward and doing, these types of congressional hearings, like with David Grush, Commander Fravor, Lieutenant Ryan Graves. So it's an all domain kind of action that we're trying to take when we're moving this topic forward through journalism and also just utilizing, media to get the message out. So I'm hopeful. George, even if we've had some setbacks here or there, I'm hopeful, man. People should keep fighting.
In line with the idea of getting disclosure the hard way or the easy way, and it looks like we're kind of going down the flow of the hard way, or at least harder way than it has to be, here is a remarkable clip with James Fox. That was an interview that occurred on April 4th, 2023. I was fortunate enough to be part of that interview with another podcaster whose channel has disappeared, so I don't want to cite it because maybe that person wants privacy. But here, James Fox goes into a backup plan that will be implemented if the truth about UFOs and a back engineering program is not being processed through proper channels because of obfuscation and resistance from the intelligence community and whoever else deems that they don't want this truth to come out. So listen very carefully to this absolutely remarkable clip with James Fox, because it appears to me is part of that backup plan if things don't go the way that these whistleblowers and those fighting this for disclosure wanted to go. And this gives the impression that his upcoming documentary, the program, which we will delve into as this video progresses, is going to have some very compelling firsthand witnesses who just want to put an end to the cover-up.
And I met with intelligence folks that had just met with Kirkpatrick and met with Senate Intel, and they couldn't share every single detail because it was classified, but they did with them, sort of as a precautionary measure that if their testimony went into Arrow and never came out, they could have a backup plan going public and saying, look, I gave testimony to the Senate Intel, I gave testimony to, and what they're basically saying is that these programs exist, these reverse engineered programs exist. And again, this is what they shared with me was
are they currently employed? The intelligence folks that were speaking?
Some of them were, yes. Okay. And some of them were retired, but no, a lot of them were still employed.
Wow.
Don't take it from me. And I have this on camera just recently. Don't take it from me. Don't take my testimony, but I'm here to tell you, this is the name of the program. This is the location of the program. These are the names of the individuals involved with the programs. And if you give me the credentials or the security clearance, I'll walk you into the labs. And that's happening right now. in Washington, D.C. And I've seen the photographs, these guys' credentials, not one, not two, not three, but over more than three. And they're telling me about their friends that are also testifying. So there's a lot going on. The question is whether Kirkpatrick is going to, who's he going to share it with?
Now let's get into James Fox's upcoming documentary. And I'll just say a lot of the things we just covered, I obviously can't give you a completely clear picture on it because it's nuanced, and circumstances change as new developments emerge. So I can only offer you what James Fox has stated, and you can interpret it through your own lens of perception. But let's get into his upcoming film, The Program. This is going to be a huge film, and I'm going to go over multiple tweets from James Fox because we can learn a lot about what he's been up to and what the impact of the film might be based upon things he's said on Twitter. Let's start with this tweet from July 2nd. Sleeve McDykel wrote, "How does the release of Elizondo's book impact when you will be releasing this film, if it impacts it at all? I would assume there's some overlap between the two works based on the subject. Can't wait to see it, and then listening to your next JRE episode." To which James Fox responds, "Power in numbers." Now that's interesting. The suggestion is that there's a multiplying effect, if you will. So Lue Elizondo's book comes out on August 20th, 34 days from now, July 17th. And James Fox's film comes out in a couple months. We don't have the exact date. But James Fox's film will inevitably come out within close proximity of Lue Elizondo's book. And so we also have a documentary featuring Lue Elizondo coming out sometime soon, and we'll cover that later. We have the op-ed of David Grush coming out at some point. And I'm sure that, and now this is not inside information, but I'm just assuming that Lue Elizondo will be on Joe Rogan podcast. And we also have new hearings that are likely to occur this year. So this should underscore the sentiment from James Fox. There's power in numbers. So the remainder of the year should be really interesting, and it should be a very powerful manifestation of the resistance. Here's another interesting tweet that he dropped on May 22nd during the production of this film. As is the case most of the time, we had a couple of very powerful and credible individuals come forward at the last minute. So we paused the narration session with Peter Coyote until the end of next month while we insert the new material throughout. It will be well worth it. Unacceptable News responds, "Do you still talk to the witnesses from Virginia?" And he responds, "Daily." So that's great to hear that James Fox exercised flexibility during the production of this film so that later in the production, when he was able to speak with a couple of very powerful and credible individuals, he was able to get that footage and then put it into the film to enhance the film. That's exactly what we want to hear. Let's continue with some James Fox tweets. Joff Guy says on July 2nd, "Awesome, James. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is the boat going to get rocked by your new documentary?" James Fox responds, "It will most definitely be rocked, zero doubt." And of course, the zero doubt comment is alluding to the comment made by former Colonel Karl Nell when he was asked whether non-human intelligence is engaging our Earth, in which he responded, "There's no doubt." On June 21st, Adam wrote, "Release date and platform. Is there still a first-hand witness, or has Jason Sands been cut and that was all? Excited to watch." James Fox responds, "I don't think you'll be disappointed." And of course, Jason Sands is a controversial witness, but I don't think Jason Sands would be the only first-hand witness. If Jason Sands is in the film, that's going to be having a role in the upcoming documentary, The Program. And as James Fox said, I don't think you'll be disappointed. On July 12th, James Fox wrote, "We'll be handing the program over on Monday for sound design and color correction. Film the screen to share a small segment towards the end. Thanks for all your continued support." MCP wrote, "Can you tease if there will be any new videos or pics of UAPs?" James Fox responds, "Featuring an entire segment on the best picture in history, yes, and many." So this is, of course, very big. He stated that he's featuring an entire segment within his documentary, the program, on the best picture in history. And he goes further than that and seems to say, from what I perceive, there will be many videos and pics that are new of UAP that will be included in his upcoming documentary. So from that exchange, I perceive that one of the images that James Fox is certainly going to show in his upcoming documentary that's never been seen before is from the Calvin incident that took place on August 4th, 1990. It was an image of a diamond-shaped flying object hovering in the middle of the sky near Calvin, Scotland. Two individuals were hiking, and they managed to snap a photograph of it. And to demonstrate why I am near certain that this will be the longer segment he cited in his tweet, here is a June 7th tweet that supports my contention. "Wow. Two British friends took this UFO picture, then vanished after a visit from sinister men in dark suits. Breaking his silence after 34 years, their old colleague now reveals what happened and says they were not meant to see it. Name cannot be blank responded, still looks like a rock and reflection to me. Looking forward to the new documentary though." James Fox responds, "I promise you will not believe that once you see the new film." So obviously the image that he has from the Calvin incident is never been seen before. It's a higher quality image than has ever been publicly shown before. That's my interpretation. Dr. Dan Villiers wrote, "You own this photo, right?" James Fox responds, "Rights to use it in my new film, and we do." In response to Representative Andre Carson of Illinois, James Fox said, "Your segment in our latest documentary, The Program, is fantastic. We'll share a link with your staff soon. Thank you for your support, Congressman." That's kind of cool, and I think is a good sign, because if people like Andre Carson are going to be in his upcoming documentary, that gives it a lot of weight when members of Congress are willing to be part of it. And I have very high expectations for his upcoming documentary, and I do think it will rock the boat. So let's go right into Lue Elizondo's upcoming book, Imminent. Now, in September of 2021, he was on the Disclosure Team's YouTube channel. I'm not going to show the clip because I've showed it so many times, but I will give you the gist of what Elizondo said regarding his book that he's been working on. He's obviously done now, but he worked on it for quite a while. He said, "The purpose of the book will be very apparent when it comes out. People that know me will say, 'Ah, that clever guy.' People that don't know me are probably going to wind up eating some of their words." So from that, we can ascertain that Lue Elizondo's purpose of writing the book transcends merely telling his story. There's a purpose behind it that we will discover when it comes out. And I think in Lue Elizondo being a former intelligence officer, counter intel guy, who's using his skill set to pressure the government to come clean on the UFO issue, on that basis, whatever purpose he's speaking about should probably be really revealing and really interesting. But he also did an interview, and I don't know if I've ever shared this clip, from October of 2021 on Kurt Jaimungal's channel, Theories of Everything. And here he reveals further information on what his book entails. Let's play that clip.
Matt Wood asks, Lou, have you had any holy shit moments where you learned a truth about something so over the top that it wasn't even on your question list? Speaking of question lists.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let me continue then, so you have more to riff off of. How many times have extraordinary revelations occurred to you as you were learning about this phenomenon?
So as it relates to UAP, there were a few. I'm beginning to put my thoughts down on paper. There were quite a few, each time it challenged my perspective on things. It challenged my understanding of the universe and our place in it. But not quite yet prepared to have that conversation. But I will have it at some point.
Did you ever lose sleep over it?
All the time.
That was an extraordinary interaction with Lue Elizondo that deserves reiterating. He said he had a few extraordinary revelations, quite a few extraordinary revelations. He said that he's beginning to put his thoughts down on paper. He's obviously alluding to his book, which we're going to be able to read in about 32 days, 31 days, depending upon when this publishes. He said that every time that he would have an extraordinary revelation about UFOs because of his position in the government, where he got data and learned more about this phenomenon, it challenged his perspective on things in his understanding of the universe and our place in it. And then he goes on to say that he's going to have that conversation at some point, but he's not quite ready for it. And he also was asked, do you ever lose sleep over the things that you've learned? And he said, all the time. That's pretty heavy. That's extremely heavy. And so this gives a glimpse into the content of his book. I think it's going to be quite revealing. On June 27th, James Iandoli had Daniel Sheehan, the big-time lawyer Daniel Sheehan, on, and James asked him about Elizondo's book. Let's take a listen.
What can you say about Lue's upcoming book? I mean,
I can tell you it's coming out. It's coming out in the middle of August, and that he is going to be having a major book tour that is going to be financed by the publishing company, and that there are going to be numerous gatherings and discussions and stuff surrounding basically each one of his appearances throughout the country, with people from the public being invited to come and have additional presentations made, information shared with them, and inviting them to become part of the Citizens for Disclosure. That is a major movement that the New Paradigm Institute is sponsoring.
Having a major book tour paid by the publishing company, numerous gatherings and discussions sounds pretty interesting. And like I said before, I don't have inside information, but I think there's a very good chance Lue Elizondo will be on the Joe Rogan Experience. So his book coming out is probably going to make a lot of splashes. Here is an amazing clip from Merge Podcast, July 5th, 2023. And I think Commander David Fravor is mentioning a documentary that him and Ryan Graves will be in, but also Lue Elizondo, because we know that Lue Elizondo is going to be in an upcoming documentary, and I think David Fravor is citing that very documentary.
I think, to your point, we are going to see a lot of changes in this area over the next few years, so perhaps we'll have you back on and we can discuss some of them.
You know, Ryan, I hope we do, and I hope I get invited back. I think, there's some stuff coming out. There's the documentary that I know you're a part of that's going to be coming out that I think is going to be game changing. There's been a lot of stuff said, but I think this is going to have the right amount of people. I'm not saying who it is or when it is, but there is something being put together that I think, hopefully it will come out and it'll be, that one thing that pushes it over that says, all right, we can't, the cat is definitely out of the bag, because I think there's going to be some interesting information that comes out in it. So it'll be good. I think it's an exciting times.
Definitely worth a quick reiteration. Commander Fravor said he thinks it will be game changing. Right amount of people, which is really an interesting thing to say. It makes me wonder who's going to be in it, but it could be some very hard-hitting ex or even current government officials, which could have a big influence if they communicate the reality of the phenomena. And he said, hopefully it will be that one thing that pushes it over, and now the cat is absolutely out of the bag. So he is definitely giving this documentary a tremendous, tremendous amount of weight. And remember where James Fox was asked by someone on Twitter, as I recall, is it intentional that your documentary is coming out within proximity to Elizondo's book? And he just answered, there's strength in numbers. So the remainder of 2024 and 2025 should be really fascinating. And I've assessed this only goes in one direction, and inevitably we will get UFO confirmation, especially if the Rounds-Schumer legislation gets passed in full, right? That will definitely expedite the inevitable. Now, here is a very interesting tweet that J. Christopher Kean dropped on July 18th. And he was quoting Engaging the Phenomena's interview with Peter Levenda. J. Christopher Kean wrote, "A lot of amazing media will be coming out this fall on UAP, UFOs, and related topics. Lue Elizondo's book, James Fox's movie, our TV docuseries, The Beyond, 2 other shows off the top of my head that haven't announced yet, another very important documentary film. One of the projects I'm most excited about in terms of the information conveyed is Peter Levenda's new book, Secret Machines, War, written with Tom DeLonge. Peter is the real deal in so many ways. He covers this area in a pretty fearless and all-encompassing approach. And for those of you that don't know already, Peter's view is an inside perspective in more ways than one. I'll leave it at that. Look forward to more from him soon." So it is July 18th as I'm filming this. There are 33 days until Lue Elizondo's book Imminent comes out. And it seems like it's only going to get more interesting from there. More hearings, David Grush's op-ed, documentaries in regards to James Fox's The Program documentary. Apparently, as far as I understood from what he said, there'll be new images and new videos of UFOs in that, including from the Calvin incident. So David Fravor said, I think he said there's really important information coming out in the documentary he cited, which I think is Lue Elizondo's upcoming documentary, or at least a documentary that Lue Elizondo is part of. All I can say is I think we're getting that test, right? Because at some point this has to implode or revert to pre-December 16th, 2017 levels if there's nothing to see here. And if there is something to see here, then maybe we can expect this to continue, because maybe when secrets start to come out and the inevitable push has occurred within that trajectory, you can't really stop the momentum anymore because we've come too far. There comes a time that you hit a tipping point, and there's nothing the government or corporate interest can do at that point to stop the inevitable. And that might be where we are right now. So that's really exciting. I apologize for not having uploaded in a while. Thank God my concentration has been improving, so I'm very grateful for that. That's a good sign, and I'm going to take advantage of that to the best of my ability, and hopefully in the remainder of July, I'll get a couple big videos out, and that this video is only the beginning of this month. of my new momentum that I want to initiate. So thank you so much. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You could become a patron. You could give me a one-time donation. You could become a YouTube member, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy and I'll appreciate it so much. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.